Sam, thank you so much. What a way to kick off day 2 of our symposium. At YourCoach, we're constantly keeping tabs on new innovations in health and wellness to keep our coaching community ahead of the curve. Digital therapeutics came onto the scene as clinically validated, evidence-based software therapies. The next panel will explore the interfaces and opportunities between you, health coaches, and these therapies. Please join Dr. Megan Jones-Bell, Sara Espina, Max Avruch, and Jeff Dachis, moderated by our very own Eugene Borukhovich.
And we're back. Day 2 has already started of our Global Health and Wellbeing Symposium. I am Eugene Borukhovich, and I am co-founder and CEO of YourCoach Health. And this is a super interesting panel. And I think, for most of you that are tuning in today as health coaches around the world, I just wanted to set a little bit of the context as we go through some of the introductions. And the interesting part is, to me, as I'm looking at this screen of an amazing panel, I'm kind of looking at this as parts of the body that the companies are helping. So we're going to do a little lightning round of yourselves, as well as what the company do. So maybe we'll start with the head, which is Headspace. Megan.
All right. Well, thanks, Eugene. It's great to be here with everyone today. And I'm Megan Jones-Bell. I'm the Chief Strategy and Science Officer at Headspace, which is one of the world's leading mindfulness apps. And my background, I'm a clinical psychologist. I built a coaching business previously, which was part of a company called Lantern, which is actually now the basis of the coaching platform for Ginger, for Spring Health, for part of Omada, as well as a couple of other companies. And at Headspace, I lead corporate strategy, our medical affairs team, and technology strategy, as well as oversee Headspace Health, which is our new venture.
Awesome. So I'll move down to a little back pain. I know that's where Kaya started out. So Sara, maybe introduce yourself and what Kaya does for our wonderful health coaches out there.
Sure. So I'm Sara Espina, and I'm with Kaya Health, which is based in Munich, actually, but I'm part of the US branch that's based in New York. My background, I have my master's degree in nutrition. I'm an intrinsic coach and just sat for my boards a few weeks ago, so fingers crossed for later this year. Kaya itself, Eugene mentioned MSK, so we are a digital therapeutics company that pretty much puts a physical therapist in your phone and in your pocket. We leverage multimodal therapy to incorporate relaxation, education, as well as the physical exercises to help manage MSK. We'll just call it MSK pain today. Myself, historically, I come from the corporate wellness world, actually, and used to be the lead content strategist at a corporate wellness company in Seattle, Washington, and helped to develop, write, and lead several programs across whether it was building resilience, maternal health, or I also created a CDC compliant DPP program and led that as well. And so now at Kaya, I am our senior health coach, and I drive Kaya's coaching philosophy and our program, and work across the product team to help figure out how to integrate coaching into the product itself.
Awesome. Well, let's move to the gut, right? I always joke around with Marina that, as we're watching on YourCoach hundreds and hundreds of coaches, I always use, for some reason, the example of a gut coach, health coach. So Max, please, Oshi Health.
Yeah, so hi everyone, pleasure to be here. So I'm Max Avruch. I am the Director of Health Coaching at Oshi Health. And so we are a digital health startup that is advancing the standard of disease management in that digestive healthcare space. So we are really building a full-scale virtual clinical operations and virtual clinic for patients who have all types of GI disorders and diseases. And so my role is really focused on designing, developing, and executing an integrated coaching model within the care system. So we are building what we like to call gastrointestinal health coaches, who really have specialization within GI, but really pull from all levers of health. So obviously we incorporate what Kaya, Headspace, Omada, what a lot of other companies are doing really successfully, but really thinking about it within the GI space. So my background, I sort of at the intersection of operations and clinical. I came from the Boston Consulting Group, Digital Ventures, where I worked in operations for several years. And then prior was at Omada Health, was on the early team with our coaching team as a diabetes health coach myself. So really take that experience, and it's been really fun to really help to build out our program at Oshi and think about how to really scale and create an effective coaching program.
Well, and now to Mr. Jeff Dachis, metabolic, and the first time I bought my one-drop device, I was super impressed. And please, your introduction, company. I know you've been expanding as well.
Thanks, Eugene, and thanks to everyone else on the panel here for taking the time. I'm Jeff Dachis. I'm the founder and CEO of OneDrop. We're a data-driven chronic condition self-care management program platform. We focus on diabetes, prediabetes, weight loss, hypertension, hyperlipidemia right now, and then are moving into cardiovascular conditions, renal care over the coming next year. Just by way of background, a long time ago, I started a company called Razorfish, which became one of the largest digital marketing solutions firms in the world. And most importantly, it allowed me to work with some really, really talented people on evolving how digital can impact almost every industry on the planet. That came to a head for me in some ways when I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in September of 2013. And I was shocked at the lack of health nor care that I had received from the healthcare industry. I got about 6 minutes with a nurse practitioner, an insulin pen and a prescription and a pat on the back, and I was out the door with diabetes. And that left me really wondering what was going on in the $3.5 trillion healthcare economy we have here in the US, and more importantly, what's happening to the 1 in 2 people suffering from chronic conditions worldwide. When the sick care system isn't really doing its job at creating either health nor care. So I thought there had to be a better way to drive self-empowerment, better choices, and behavior change the 8,759 hours a year that I wasn't at the doctor's office. And so we founded OneDrop with that idea, and we've sort of created now an army of empathy that allows us to really help people make the right choices, make change in their lives, and live healthier.
Awesome. So just for, I think we're all in the space, with kind of novel health services, with new experiences and digital therapeutics. And this is a panel about intersection of what we are doing with health coaching. To set a little bit of the context for our global community of coaches, we also had a panel between Margaret Moore and Dan Kendall around, how, while health coaching has been around for about 20 years, it's come into really speed of light since the AMA announced that a health coach is a non-clinical member of a healthcare team, kind of uniting the health and wellness space with the healthcare space. And they also talked quite a bit about the CPT codes for testing that came out in January and some of the reimbursements paths for health coaching. And I think for our community, I wanted to set a little bit of more context of how the DTX or digital therapeutic is even defined. I'm not going to go into it. There's a Digital Therapeutic Alliance. I don't want to go too deep. I also question some of those things, but just to set the stage, it is clinically validated, software-driven therapeutic interventions, right? And the promise and the premise of a digital therapeutic and a digital technology was it's the technology that's helping us as consumers of that service or a therapeutic. Why we're here now talking about health coaching. So what's the use cases, to the extent that you can talk, between the marriage of that digital therapeutic and a digital intervention with real people, right? And health coaches. So maybe I'll start with you, Sara, and then we'll move you around.
Yeah, sure. So this is actually an ongoing conversation that we have at Kaya all the time, because within the digital therapeutic realm, you're right, like there's a clinical background, there are all of these research pieces, especially in the MSK world, right? We have to be very careful of the clinical side. And that piece has to remain as the solution, right? That has to be what the treatment, quote unquote, would be in relation to that product. And so then it becomes, okay, you have this product that is kind of a service-based thing, right? You're doing exercises, you're providing a therapy, but then you have coaching, which is also a service and enrichment type piece. So how do you ensure that if you are having coaching alongside the therapy of the in-app experience, how does that not become the solution? How do you separate the two, especially once you get into, clinical studies and all of that, to make sure that the solution remains the product itself? And so for Kaya, for us, one of the biggest learnings for me stepping into this company and coming out of, I used to work with Aduro, and the corporate wellness world, was that we don't get paid for coaching. And so it's a little bit different. And in the way the contracting is works out, it's more about the in-app activities. So again, it's always driving the user back into the app, but then, okay, how can we supplement? How can we empower these users to maximize that experience? And so with coaching at Kaya, our main goal is to boost user engagement and retention. And we do that through coaching sessions. We do that through proactive coach outreach, through our coach chat system. And also we're considered the one-touch person pretty much. So users come to us for in-app tech questions, coach questions, subscription type questions.
The front door, right? We always say
that is an excellent way to put us. Yes, we are the front door at this point. And so we are that one human touch within the app. We, of course, also then within those sessions help them support them in creating SMART goals, right? That create that self-efficacy, that create that autonomy and that sense of power over their health through action items that work well for them. And we also provide in that way that human connection, right? Change, and especially this kind of change, everybody knows what to do. We all know smoking's bad, right? But yet there are still many smokers around the world. So it's figuring out, okay, yes, I know what I have to do. How do I do that? How do I make that work for me? And that's part of where coaching comes in to boost that awareness.
Perfect. So Megan, I'm on day 1082, right? So I've established a streak now. I will admit I've actually had to reset it once or twice because of the pre-COVID travel synchronization things. But my point a little bit, I'm actually pretty adherent to the technology, and it's been helping me. Where's your head, no pun intended, on health coaching and interactions?
It's a great question. Well, Eugene, congratulations for your streak. You're a great example for everyone else. So for me, when I think about the role of coaching in a mental health intervention, it is, building on what Sara was describing, certainly about supporting adherence to the more structured intervention, which is really delivering the therapeutic, even if it's in the prevention side of the spectrum, which is in regards to Headspace, we are a mental health promotion and prevention intervention, not a treatment intervention.
Yeah.
But in my previous work, it was I had designed actually in 2009 a coaching plus basically a blended intervention. So there was coaching plus a self-guided CBT intervention. That's really what became Lantern. And I added coaching specifically because of something that I've seen and heard from end users, or which we call members at Headspace. I heard in my research, I heard at Lantern, I've heard at Headspace, but people want a human connection, and behavior change is hard. And as a psychologist, I have always helped support behavior change in the context of a relationship. And so while you certainly can design a fun, engaging, beautiful product, and you should try to get as much juice out of that orange as you can, there are still going to be people, and it's not 100% of people, but there will still be a very meaningful subset of your end users who just want that human support along their journey. And so to me, that's really the heart of the reason to include it, is because it's direct feedback from members about the way they want to experience change and be supported through that change journey. I really believe in putting the members' needs first when you're designing an intervention or product. And second, in mental health, our algorithms are still not good enough to manage risk independently. And so if you have a product where you have free text inputs, or you're asking people to track symptoms, you need to have a mechanism of monitoring risk in as close to real time as possible, so that you protect the safety of your members, so that you know how to recommend additional step up in their care plan. And so really in mental health, because our approach to measurement is very imperfect, I believe you really need this blend of symptom monitoring through asking them to answer structured questions, but also to really gather that expert trained view on but do they like when someone would walk into the door of my office when I was a practicing therapist, I could tell that they were depressed just by the way that they walked in, their eye contact, their how slow or fast they move their body. There are a lot of unspecific things that even in text-based coaching interaction, you can get a gut feeling that something is wrong. And so I believe in certain use cases clinically, it's appropriate to have that safety mechanism of human and technology support for risk management as well.
As Marina, my better half, always says, it's the human eye on top of AI, right? So it's you absolutely need that. So Jeff, I'll thank you. I'll jump to you. So I'm for all the viewers, I am pre-diabetic, and I've been managing to it with exercise. And I remember again buying one drop, and when you have an incentive and you have the drive, cool, but when you fall off it, probably not good. So I'll leave it to you. I mean, just talk a little bit about one drop and your approach to health coaching.
Yeah, thank you, Eugene. And Megan, you raised you said it so apropos, this idea of a dialogue in a relationship. And I want to touch on that in just a minute. But at One Drop, we're really focused on delivering an experience that generates an intrinsic set of behaviors, not an intervention from the outside in, not an extrinsic thing that's happening to me, but something that people build intrinsically. And we don't believe that, at least in chronic care, that chronic conditions can be managed extrinsically. We just don't, that's not in our belief system. We don't believe that the system that is putting stuff on us, making us adhere to things, making us sort of listen to these episodic interventions that happen every 6 months. We don't believe that generates actually any intrinsic motivation to change the behavior that we know impacts chronic conditions.
Nobody wants to be told you're not adherent.
Right, or even to adhere to something. You need to build those skills and that understanding intrinsically. But, in terms of personalization, we also know that extrinsic population health approaches where one size fits all for a thing, just doesn't fit me. It's not a thing that this therapy intervention isn't necessarily directed at me. It's directed at somebody sort of like me. But I'm pregnant, or but I'm going through this stressful thing, or but I don't sleep well, or I have 6 kids, or whatever my thing is. It's not really directed at me. It's directed sort of at me. And so population-based interventions have huge amounts of waste. So one, and then two, they're not precise enough to actually impact me in a meaningful way. And so what I want to get at in terms of OneDrop's approach to coaching is that we're interested in building these intrinsically motivated individuals who are empowered to take their own health into their own hands, one, and two, in delivering a personalized experience that's right for just them. And sometimes people want to talk to a coach, and that's awesome. And they engage, and they're super chatty Cathys, and they're like, wow, I really want to talk to a coach all the time. Call me next Tuesday. Let's get into my coaching thing. And that works sometimes, right? But for someone else, they don't want to talk to a coach at all, ever. And they can still get the same impact out of the OneDrop platform through other sort of intrinsic motivators. And so that dialogue that Megan referred to, that relationship, is not just a human and a human relationship, but it's a set of experiences and the individual's relationship with the different forms of intrinsic motivation, intrinsic personalization, and the things that allow me to become empowered to take control of the choices that I make the 8,759 hours a year that I'm not at the doctor. That's where my health lives. And so, yes, I need a guide sometimes. Sometimes I need a Sherpa. Sometimes I need a co-pilot. Sometimes I need a dictator. Sometimes I need a nudge. Sometimes I need a kick in the pants, right? And it's that dialogue and that personalization that helps me develop the intrinsic motivation that I need to stay healthy. And sometimes it's a full-blown coaching program, 12 weeks, rigid. And sometimes it's nudgy interventions and check-ins, and sometimes it's scheduled appointments. It's all of those forms, and that's where we bring the OneDrop platform. And I hope that. I
also want to say your passion exudes, and I think you also need a dance partner sometimes. So.
I do. I'm Jeff Hand Wavy Zoom guy.
Fantastic. Max, let's jump straight in. Gut health.
It's last but not least, right? For me, I think what's so fascinating, you've all touched on this, is the beauty of rapport and relationships in the quality of health coaching. What I am very challenged by, but most excited about the work at Oshi Health and what we're doing is we're integrating health coaching into this full care model, as well as trying to understand what does a gastrointestinal health coach look like. The empowerment of relationship is absolutely paramount, not just to drive behavior change, but in terms of accountability and that partnership. And we're seeing this across all the different provider lenses in terms of how we want to really not just change the standard of care in GI, but really think about what does a sustainable relationship look like. Within coaching and trying to understand sort of how to build a coaching program designed at GI, it's wildly complex, but also fascinating because we're really trying to understand what is the nitty gritty of it, right? So unlike, I think, more models that are focused on one specific chronic condition, we have to target all these different types of chronic conditions, different tenures, different levels of severity. Mm-hmm. So it really goes past this idea of just symptom management or improving quality of life. For us, we're trying to understand is what is the long-term value in it? How we can actually impact our patients long-term. And so the questions that come up a lot is understanding the different users, what would be most impactful. So instead of thinking of a standard 12-week program, Jeff, you just mentioned this, for me, one thing I'm trying to understand is some patients really don't need access to a health coach. They already have some behaviors in place to monitor their health. They need more support around sort of the clinical space. So that's where I think coaching really leans on other clinical members. So we partner with dietitians. We have NPs, gastroenterologists, and GI-focused psychologists on staff to support that. So the magic of coaching is really understanding and partnering with all these different providers and creating these verticals of support, whether it's dietary focused or more mental health focused. We really understand the value of being able to think about it within not just improving GI, but also, again, the long-term value of it. So it's exciting as much as it is challenging, because there's so many different layers to it within gut health. And gut health also, to think about what is gut health, right? I think within coaching, we can really take that from almost every angle possible in terms of health behaviors, right? Sleep, mindfulness, mental health, diet, weight loss, weight gain, thinking through sort of their own sort of like social and play. And then there's so many different angles you can take it. So I think that's what within the work we're doing has been some most exciting, but also I think interesting as it evolves.
So, it's interesting as I'm hearing all of you guys talk, and I, coming out of the healthcare system where a lot of things were siloed, what I think health coaching brings to the table. And I, Marina, my wife and CEO of YourCoach, is the health coach. I just finished a 9-week, because as a COO, I think I need to know what health coaching is, at least feel some of this. And I said it to a class and well coaches to, I think, 42 students. I said, I feel like this is like non-clinical psychotherapy to help people just achieve their goal very holistically. And so when we talk about whether it's, it's gut, it's reversing diabetes, it's MSK, I think that's the beauty of health coaches, bringing a lot of this together. And, one of the things that we're finding super interesting at YourCoach, one of the cool features that Marina developed is co-coaching, because when your scope of practice stops, right, or you're stuck, you can actually bring other coaches in to almost like back to this in healthcare. It's accountable care model. We're looking at this as accountable wellness model, right, where you can actually treat a person as a whole. But let's jump to some of the maybe a little bit more lightning round on. We did in February published a report on health coaching industry. And we've sort of calculated or counted probably about 200 clinical trials that have health coaching attached to it. About half of them were done by then. Another 100 were in process of starting. Maybe just a minute and a half on how you guys look at clinical trials to actually prove the value of health coaching to the extent you can talk about it. Let's start with you, Megan. I know.
Yeah, well, we just submitted a paper from work that we did at Lantern, actually in India, where we did a randomized controlled trial, essentially to a purely self-guided cognitive behavioral therapy intervention for anxiety disorders versus the Lantern program, which was, essentially the same thing plus coaching. And we actually had to stop the randomization into the comparison condition for ethical reasons, because the engagement with that intervention, the self-guided intervention, was so poor that it simply wasn't ethical to continue to randomize participants into an intervention that no one was using. So I share that just as an example of, if you look at that research, and what I've found in, probably a dozen studies that I've done through my work at Stanford, Lantern, et cetera, was that adding a coach really dramatically increases effective use of interventions. I like to think about, this relationship between engagement and efficacy, where if you don't have engagement, then even if it in theory is an efficacious intervention, no one actually got the medicine, then how are they going to get better? And so I think we really consistently see positive effects for the addition of coaching to interventions.
Perfect. Any other thoughts, comments? Because I'm going to have one more, and we're coming to the end very quickly. And
I'm going to echo what Megan said. In all of the clinical studies that we've done, whether they be RCTs, prospective, retrospective, real world, we've got a ton of published over 20 published clinical studies now. Universally, those that deploy coaching as part of the program or part of the study, the individuals typically, will do better. And so I'll just say it's a super important part of the mix. It's not the only part, but it's a super important part of the mix that you have to have when thinking about what works.
I call it the magic, really, with coaching. So we ran some pilot programs at Oshi over this last year, and we really saw I mean, obviously, I was biased, right? And it's part of my role as I had an hypothesis around what we see, what can happen out of coaching. But within GI, the fragmentation of care is real, right? A lot of patients don't have sort of that multidisciplinary access to be able to not manage their conditions, but also to kind of live a healthier life. And so adding in coaching within GI really helps to elevate care plan delivery, as well as provide that level of support that they wouldn't necessarily have. So, because I think too with GI is there's two components that I see as the most relevant, which is understanding and being able to manage your condition, but also what are the foundational aspects towards health and well-being to maintain. And so a lot of that is foundational learning, but also making sure to weave that into how to be able to understand your condition, disease, and be able to manage it long-term. So there's a interplay with prevention and maintenance, and I don't want to call it reversal, but also thinking through like how to prevent further flare-ups that coaching we've seen has such a direct impact on a positive patient experience.
Yeah, I mean, to that point and to Jeff's as well, it takes that that standard of care, right? No matter what the industry is or what the disease state might be. And it customizes it, it personalizes it to that person who has 6 kids or that guy who travels 5 days a week for work, right? It takes the solution and it enables through coaching, it facilitates this relationship and dialogue to figure out, okay, how can I leverage this and weave it into my existing routine, which is completely and utterly unique to me, and make it work in my favor rather than one thing I always say to coaches is I want this to be something that adds value to your life, not something that's another thing you have to check off your list today that's going to stress you out. And so figuring out what that looks like for every single coachee is going to be different. And that's where I think the efficacy, we see it as well with Kai. I mean, just to echo all of that, it's being able to take whatever those solutions and the efficacy of the therapy and say, okay, how am I going to leverage that in my life? How am I going to make that work for me? And the second a user is able to see that path and understand, okay, here's where I am, here's where I want to go. Here's maybe 3 or 4 steps that I can start taking to get me to that place. Then they realize, okay, I can do this. And their self-confidence, their self-efficacy grows. And that's what then has that really positive impact on the efficacy of the treatment itself.
Jeff, you mentioned about...
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah.
We've got a little bit of time.
Real quick too about, beyond behavior change, accountability partner, being that person to really just like get to the next level. I think what we've seen too is, I think holding to a one source truth definition of what coaching is, right? Where you can be agents of change, support behavior change, bring out the best in you, but also coaching what I've seen and then the work we're doing at Oshi, and also just be that partner to get them to where they need to go, to that destination.
Awesome. So let's switch gears a little bit. Again, we have hundreds and hundreds of coaches watching us now all around the world. Let's talk a little bit. I mean, we know that the healthcare system is under such tremendous pressure, and a little bit as I talk to more and more coaches, there's a little bit of we're the saviors, especially around helping people, because I mean the docs are super busy, the nurses are super busy. I mean everybody is, but let's talk about a little bit about the business models, if you can, to the extent like where does that fall in, and what are the opportunities for the future of health coaching, right? And some of the younger individuals that are going into this field. And again, just try to keep it to like a minute or so, just so we can wrap up on time.
I'll just make a quick comment. What I think the business model that it's not going to be is going to be in this sort of episodic appointment setting model that the current healthcare system uses to deliver fee for services. I don't think that approach, while it may generate CPT codes and may get billed in some form in the future, great for that particular mode of operation. Not necessarily the way in which you're going to engage users in a successful outcome. And so I'd like to hypothesize that the business model for coaching is going to look a lot different than the episodic fee-for-service model that we're currently, sort of experiencing. And you can see that in the, we employ a lot of certified diabetes educators, dietitians, and a variety of other coaches. And those folks hated working in their clinics because of the form at which they had to make phone calls out through the disease management programs and then establish 30 appointments in a given week. And then 7 of those 30 people may show up for their appointment, for a 30-minute appointment. And the rest of the time was spent doing a whole bunch of stuff that had no relation to coaching whatsoever. And so
we meet so many nurses that left the nursing practice, left the hospitals because they're basically saying, right? I mean, aside from doing all the grunt work as it is, now we're doing administrative.
That's right.
We can no longer help patients inside the system.
That's right.
Let's do this outside. So
we have 2 nurses
let's jump
on
to Sara.
our team. Yeah, I mean, 2 out of 2 of our members of our team are former nurses, and I completely agree. I think it's going to, it creates, let me back up. It fills this gap of, to use coaching language, right? That's missing when we look at the body in a holistic way. And then when we look at standard of care in a more holistic way, we have those episodic appointments. We go to the doctor when we're sick or when there's something wrong, right? But what about the rest of the time that we're building health, that we're building wellness? I see coaching in the future as being this safe place that enables people to build rapport with someone for their health and wellness journey, whatever that looks like for them, and whatever may arise, whether it's diabetes or GI issues or depression and anxiety along the way, or MSK, and allows them to flow over time with a coach who has rapport with them, who they trust implicitly, especially in Max's situation. I personally have a lot of GI issues, always have. It's part of why I am a nutritionist and a coach. And that relationship, like, you have to have a really, really strong rapport with your coach to be comfortable enough to talk about the things that you're going to have to talk about in that kind of setting. And that's where I feel coaching is really headed. It's filling this gap of bridging, creating a bridge between all of these episodic moments, right? And to create more of a holistic viewpoint on health and relationship with somebody.
And by the way, Sara, you can still talk, we had a panel yesterday of every coach needs a coach, basically, too. So.
Oh, I have one. Oh yeah. I have one who I worked with at Aduro. I recommend her to everyone, and I have coached multiple times with her.
So Max, you got about a minute.
Yeah, I'll
I'll go to Megan.
I think reducing stigma. Megan, I'm sure you've seen this within mental health. I think we're seeing this a lot within gastroenterology, is sense of embarrassment, not wanting to talk about it, feeling ashamed of having sort of GI issues. Within sort of the model we're building, for me, what I find most exciting about this world of thinking, the world of health coaching, is giving it its rigor. And I think 2 things. One, digital coaches, right? There's so much we can do with data empowered or digital health coaches that you can't do just with the traditional brick and mortar system. So that in and of itself is developing this world and digitally for coaches to be able to do incredible work and at scale. I think that is, to me, what the more and more you're in it, the more you're just like, absolutely, this is sort of the way you see it. And I think too, what we're building at Oshi is an integrated model. So I think giving coaches even with non-clinical backgrounds, an opportunity to learn clinical experience, right? But still hold true to the work that they do. And I think that's what's most exciting is, thinking through this world of seeing the beauty of what coaching can do long-term, whether it's engagement, personalization, outcome, symptom management, but also being able to understand the world of clinical, understand sort of how primary care exists and the nuances between how to make a better system for patient.
Perfect. And Megan, would love to hear what's your message to the health coaches out in the world?
My message to the health coaches, well, to your question around the business model of coaching, I think one word of caution just for the industry overall is to not over tech the experience. I think we certainly want to improve quality, risk management, efficiency through leveraging AI and other great technology that makes us better or helps us personalize. But I really want to create meaningful careers for coaches as we design coaching-based interventions in digital health. And that means not having too high of a coach to user ratio. And so I think for me, what I hope to see in terms of business model is sufficient value placed on the real service that coaches are actually providing. Because to me, that's what will lead to coaching retention, job satisfaction, and great outcomes for members.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, all. I hope all of you coaches learned a lot. And next up is our health coaching around the worldwide. So we're going to hear from quite a few different locations of what's happening around health coaching world. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Eugene.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.